Alright, enough screwing around. Most recently in this series, I looked at Star Trek Voyager, which is my least favorite show in the franchise. Here's the cast having their photo taken at JCPenney, by the way. So now I think it's only fair that I turn my attention to my favorite Star Trek show, Deep Space Nine. But this isn't as simple as it seems. After all, what facet of Deep Space Nine should I examine? The character of Gul Dukat, arguably the most compelling and three-dimensional of all Star Trek villains? Perhaps the mystery of how Odo is able to assume not only the shape, but also apparently the mass of much smaller objects? The glorious overacting of Avery Brooks? All excellent future topics, but for this first trip through the wormhole, Anyway, I thought I would take a look at a complex issue that Deep Space Nine deals with better than any other Star Trek show. That issue is religion, and I'll examine it in this video, which I am calling How Deep Space Nine Actually Gets Religious Tolerance Right. Deep Space Nine is hardly the first Star Trek show to portray religion, but it does deal with it much more explicitly and feature more overtly religious characters than its counterpart series in the franchise. Before DS9, the subject was mostly alluded to, rather than presented head-on. In the original series, it's typically shown to be a means of manipulating less advanced species. The religious beliefs of Captain Kirk and his crew are left ambiguous, and it's left to our imaginations whether life for most citizens of the Federation includes a spiritual component at all. Diversity and pluralism seem to be cherished values, so we can assume any religious communities that do exist are treated with respect and afforded equality under the law. But in the big picture, Federation society seems pretty secular, organized not around religious beliefs, but around principles that presumably most everyone can agree on: democracy, science, and coming to work in your pajamas. And when we get to the next generation, it's pretty much the same thing. Minus the pajamas. Sometimes. I figured I would get it out of the way early this time. Anyway, all this changes when we get to Deep Space Nine. Okay, the uniforms still look like pajamas, but in terms of religion, it's obvious from the first episode that this series is going to be very different. The space station after which the series is named is located near a wormhole which the people of the nearby planet Bajor revere as a celestial temple, the home of their gods, who the Bajarans call the Prophets. The lead protagonist of the series, Benjamin Cisco, is not only the Starfleet officer in command of the station, but also viewed by the Bajarans as a holy figure, the emissary of the Prophets, whose coming was foretold by their scriptures. By the end of the series, it's been revealed that the Prophets are responsible for Cisco's very existence, and that he had been conceived specifically for the purpose of becoming the emissary. Not only that, but Cisco, who begins the series extremely uncomfortable with his role in Bajaran theology, comes to accept his role as the emissary by the end of the series. Not only is it difficult to imagine, say, Captain Kirk or Captain Picard in a role like this, it's difficult to imagine the creators of Star Trek the original series or Star Trek The Next Generation making the process of coming to terms with being a holy figure in another culture's religion a major part of their long-term character development. When you judge the show by the expectations set up by the previous series, it's remarkable that the creators of Deep Space Nine chose to tell the story of Cisco the Emissary at all. But as I said, that's all long-term stuff. Cisco's emissary storyline isn't part of every episode. It's only the focal point of a handful of episodes throughout the show's 7-year run. For the rest of this video, I want to look at something a bit more specific. It's an episode about the delicate balancing act necessary when living in a religiously pluralistic society, and about the tensions that can arise when one group decides that respecting differing beliefs, even beliefs based on science, is too much of a compromise. It's the final episode of Season 1, titled In the Hands of the Prophets. In the teaser, we see Keiko O'Brien, who is the school teacher on the station, instructing the students, including Commander Cisco's son Jake, and a bunch of Bajaran children who don't have names, and I think they know why, because they're extras. This day's lesson is about the wormhole, which makes sense since they live on a space station that is right next to it. Before the lesson can really begin, a woman enters the classroom, and Keiko thinks, oh Jesus, I'm having that dream again where the station morphs into the psychiatric hospital from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. There's Nurse Ratched, and there's Fredrickson, Ellis, Billy. Wait, those are from other series. I'm really starting to lose it. Where was I? There's Cheswick, Harding, Chief, Martini. That's right, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest jokes. Because I want my demographics to skew as old as possible. Donate to my Patreon, retirees. You can't all have grandchildren. Anyway, Keiko says to the students, yeah, this wormhole of ours is pretty cool, right? Let's see, it leads to the other side of the galaxy, it's stable, it's artificially constructed, and Big Nurse is like, you know what worries me, Billy, is how your mother is going to take this. Keiko, I'm not Nurse Ratched. I'm Vedic Wynn. Get your head in the game. Sorry, what did you actually say? I said, why you teaching these Bajaran children all this science? That ain't no wormhole out there. That's our celestial temple, baby. And Keiko's like, okay, those are your religious beliefs, and I respect those, but I'm not teaching them religion. I'm teaching them science. And Wynn's like, you're teaching them blasphemy, and I'm gonna shut you down. And she leaves, and Keiko's standing there thinking, are we sure she's not Nurse Ratched? Because... So we're set up pretty neatly for a science versus religion showdown. But what I love about this episode is that's not what it ends up being about at all. Instead of pitting Keiko's Starfleet-approved science lesson against the dogmas of Wynn's church to see which one will be taught to students in the station's classroom, which could easily have happened because Star Trek's writers never tire of dramatizing trials, hearings, or arbitration of any kind, the story instead comes to be about how these people with clashing worldviews will be able to live together, or if that's even possible. Cisco hopes it's possible, but has his doubts. Even though Vedic Wynn represents an orthodox sect that doesn't wield much influence within the Bajaran church, lots of the Bajarans on the station agree with her that the religious view of the wormhole should be taught, including Major Kira, who suggests to Keiko that she should teach students about the Celestial Temple, or else maybe they should have a separate school for the Bajaran kids. And Keiko is like, no, screw that, we're having one school, and when it's time for science class, I'm teaching them science. And Kira's like, this is going to be tough to resolve because we have two opposing philosophies here. And Keiko says, I'm not teaching any philosophy. I'm just teaching the kids about the wormhole from a scientific point of view. And Kira says, that is a philosophy, you numbskull. And Keiko's like, I can't believe we're actually arguing about this in whatever the hell year this is. And Kira's like, it's the year 913 of the 7th era. And Keiko's like, not on your planet's calendar, fool. And Kira's like, what did you just say to me, bitch? And Cisco's like, I can see there's a lot of tension in the room, so why don't I just go talk to Vedic Wynn about this, huh? I'm sure if we discuss this like two reasonable adults, we can reach a compromise that will satisfy everyone. And Wynn's like, you tell that school teacher that I am on a mission from the prophets, and if she doesn't cut out the science, I will wreck her. Savvy? Go ask the last chump who crossed me how he feels. Only don't expect him to say much. And Cisco's like, well, so much for that. Oh well, at least things can't get any worse. And then somebody blows up the school. And it turns out that someone was Neela, a Bajaran member of O'Brien's engineering team, who later tries to assassinate Vedic Bareil, a more moderate member of the Bajaran church and main rival to Vedic Wynn. Neela's assassination attempt is foiled when Cisco takes her out with a spear that isn't quite of Goldbergian quality, but still way better than that half-assed tackle Roman Reigns calls a finish. I mean, come on. Anyway, Kira turns on Wynn and goes, you asshole, you set up this entire thing just to lure Bareil to the station so you could kill your #1 rival, didn't you? And Wynn's just like, whatever, I'd like to see you prove it. Later in Ops, Kira seems a little bummed about the whole religious leader orchestrating a bombing and an attempted assassination thing. And she tells Cisco, you know, I guess I supported Wynn because I just wanted my faith to be as strong as hers. And Cisco says, maybe it is. Because orthodoxy and extremism aren't the standards by which we measure strength of faith. To do that would be to treat the fundamentalists like they had a monopoly on religious authenticity, as though only extremists can ever be true believers, as if their version of their religion was the correct one, and the only difference between them and moderates was that moderates just weren't as committed. And that would be ludicrous. Okay, so out of all that, he only actually said maybe it is. I inferred the rest. The point of the episode doesn't end up being science good, religion bad, or vice versa. Rather, the point is that when your society includes people of many different religious faiths and people of no religious faith, ultimately, you have to figure out a way for you all to coexist peacefully, fairly, and honestly. That doesn't mean deferring to religious people in every conflict between the sacred and the secular, but nor does it mean erasing religious folks or dismissing their concerns out of hand. Lines need to be drawn, and extremism needs to be recognized as a threat to everyone, religious and otherwise, and treated as such. But the extremists, like Vedic Win, should not be allowed to speak for the entirety of their faiths. There's a scene between Commander Cisco and Jake that takes place after Vedic Win has announced that she and a group of Bajarans will be boycotting Keiko's school. It sums up not only the theme of this episode, but the overall attitude toward religion demonstrated by Deep Space Nine. It's a simple scene, but a great one, and it's actually the main reason I wanted to make this video. It goes a little something like this. Jake comes home from school and tells his dad that Keiko decided to teach her 5 remaining students about the persecution of Galileo because she's not really into subtlety. Jake's a smart kid, so he made the connection between the Catholic Church's reaction to Galileo's heliocentrism and Vedic Win's opposition to Keiko teaching the scientific facts about the wormhole right away. Then Jake says, "This argument is silly. They're not prophets in a celestial temple. They're freaky aliens in a wormhole. Where do the Bajarans get such stupid ideas?" And Cisco says, "To you, the religious beliefs of the Bajarans might seem foolish, but look at the facts. There is a wormhole out there, and there are entities with remarkable abilities in that wormhole. If the Bajarans call it a celestial temple instead and think of those powerful entities as prophets, maybe it's just a matter of interpretation." And I'll tell you something else, you little smartass. Don't forget that the Bajarans just got done living through a decades-long military occupation by the Cardassians. For a lot of them, their religion was all they had to lean on. And maybe we should keep that in mind and not judge them so harshly for remaining loyal to a church that includes beliefs which may seem silly to us. And it's me, the first black character to lead a Star Trek series, saying this, because this show has layers. And Jake is like, Jesus, if you're going to explain it to death, why even bother? Anyway, good episode. And a fine example of Deep Space Nine's complex depiction of the challenges of building a pluralistic society where religion is treated with respect, but not allowed to displace science or serve as a shield for extremism. That's it. This concludes my presentation. Oh, come on, we did this already. You know, actually, I tried to find an image of a scantily clad Avery Brooks because I thought that would be a fun riff on this bit for the end here, but I could not find one. And you know why I think that is? Because Avery Brooks doesn't give it away like this guy. Tart. Hey folks, hope you enjoyed this episode of Trek Actually. The next episode of this series will be about one of my very favorite Star Trek characters, Worf. So look for that in the coming weeks. If you enjoy these Trek Actually videos, please consider helping me to make more of them by supporting this channel through my Patreon campaign. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives and you can become a supporter for as little as $1 a month. And you can pledge more than that if you think I'm worth it and you can afford it. Every little bit helps. Every little bit helps me to continue making videos like these, which I really love making and that I hope you enjoy watching. So please consider that. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll see you next time.